Hello, happy Thursday, everybody. The last Thursday live before Christmas. Hopefully, you are busy in Santa's workshop getting stuff done. I'll show you some of what I'm working on. I've got a few things to go. I'm actually in better shape than I normally am this time of year. Before I forget, one of the things I wanted to point out is on the WWGOA.com, so not on YouTube, but on WWGOA.com, where you're watching this, right below the chat roll, speaking of Christmas gifts, there's a banner there that says 10 quick and easy woodworking gift ideas. So if you're looking still for stuff for this Christmas, or in general, you just want to have some gift ideas archived in the can so that you can get back to them when you want to get back to them, click on that. And that's going to give you access to those 10 plans for free. So have a look at that. And there's some pretty cool stuff in there. Some frames. I don't know. It's there's a lot of great gift things in there. So part of that is not a lot. They're not very labor intensive. And for the most part, when I'm creating those plans, I try to do it with stuff that you probably have in the shop. So in other words, you don't have to special order a bunch of hardware or something. It's material that you most likely just have laying around, just to make that a little bit easier, so that if you do get under the wire or behind the eight ball, like I often do, then you can just jump right into those projects without having to order a bunch of stuff. So we do have a question from Matthew here. Hi, George and other panel members. When doing marquetry or veneer applications to non-flat surfaces, which that alone sounds pretty cool, I use a wood softener plasticizer to bend the wood. When the product says it's plasticizing the wood, what is the chemical actually doing to the wood? For example, I understand what the shellac molecule looks like, which is, I use a lot of shellac, but I don't know what the molecule looks like, so that's cool, good. And the properties that make it useful in some applications, but not others. If I better understand what plasticizing is doing, I can then problem solve better and prevent costly errors. Unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, plasticizing gives it some malleability, right? The ability to form it, to bend it. On a molecular level, I don't know. You know, when we plasticize wood with water, with steam, we're basically just softening it. Molecularly, is that then softening the wall of the cells to allow them to flex and bend like that? Chemically plasticizing, I don't know what the chemistry of that is. It'd be an interesting thing. It'd be a good thing to just Google and see, or riddle me this, Batman. Whoever is making the product that you're using, give their customer service a call or send them an email and ask them to break it down for you. And as far as what is actually happening there, because I don't know. That's beyond. I've got a chemistry background. For a while, I thought I was going to be, in addition to a high school shop teacher, I thought I was going to be a high school physics and chemistry teacher. So I picked up a second teaching degree in that. But despite that chemistry background for teaching, I do not know how plasticizing wood works. Richard says, Merry Christmas, George. Thank you. Same to you. Working on a face grain cutting board, so not end grain, long grain. It contains diagonal segments of walnut and maple and parallel strips of cherry and walnut in the center. The center strips during glue up ended up not level with the rest of the diagonal segments. Can I use my thickness planer to level everything on both sides, or is it safer to sand? The panel will fit in my planer. So this is a good question. Planers get misused sometimes, and I'm not saying that's what Richard's talking about here, but if you're not careful about how you feed stuff through the planer, and certainly end grain cutting boards are one of those things where you really shouldn't plane an end grain cutting board. you can get into trouble. But I think if in this application, as long as you are, I'm wishing I had a cutting board thing laying here. I'm looking at my wood rack. It's not a cutting board, but it's a glue up. So if this is your long grain cutting board, and think about if we took this and we fed it through the planer, instead of dead straight, we fed it at a little bit of a bias, we're introducing a shear cut, which is a good thing, right? So when you use a hand plane on an edge or a face, often you skew the plane just a little bit, so you're coming across it with the iron at an angle. So similarly, in a planer or on a joiner, not so much on a joiner, but in a planer, you might skew the material just a little bit to get that to shear across the face instead of just attacking it straight on. So in this case, we've got a bunch of wood that's straight, parallel to the feed direction, if I understand this correctly. And then inside, there's maybe a chevron or a herringbone pattern where some pieces are put in there diagonally. So because this would be okay, feeding on the shear cut, I think if you feed straight and just those diagonal pieces are then approached on the shear like that, you should be okay. My qualifier to that would be light passes. Make sure that you do light passes and take it slow and steady so that just to mitigate any opportunity for the planer to mess that up. Do you have or have you ever considered purchasing a bandsaw mill? I've got a chainsaw mill. It's a Logisol is the brand. You know, and I've bounced around on the bandsaw mill, and here's where I end up with it. The chainsaw mill, of course, it's effective. It's got a big kerf. It's a slow process. But what I primarily cut on it is stuff where a friend of mine's got a tree service, and when he comes across stuff that's exceptionally cool, he'll drop it off here. And these are probably crotch pieces, or if he finds a piece of burl or something like that, it comes here. So it's not my intention at this stage in my woodworking to cut every stick of wood that I'm not Matt Cremona. I'm not going to cut every stick of wood that I'm about to use and air dry it or get it kiln dried before I bring it in the shop. So I'm intrigued by a bandsaw mill because I think when I do come across this stuff that's worth cutting, it'd just be way better to cut it on a bandsaw mill than a chainsaw mill. But I don't do enough of it to justify the expense. So to date, I have not gone down that road. I've been cutting, I've been working more and more with live edge slabs. I have a bunch of those I cut last summer, so not 20, but summer of 19 that I'm waiting to dry. And I could be talked into doing more slab work, not so much 4/4 lumber, but thicker live edge stuff. But yeah, not yet. Mike on YouTube asked, could you show how to make a jig for the installation of heavy-duty extending drawer slides? I understand that Craig has one for sale. I actually use the Craig one. So if you are not familiar with that, if I know where it is. Whoop, that's not it. There it is. So a jig like this, the way this works is you can fasten it. There's a ridge, a shoulder right there. You can clamp that to the front of the cabinet. This is perfectly square, perpendicular. And then the slide component can rest on top of that, ensuring that it's held perpendicular to the cabinet. I use this sometimes, but more often than not in the world of jigging for drawer slides, instead of doing that, I cut a piece that's the right distance up from the bottom of the cabinet to where the slide is going to go. So let's say we're doing a dresser and it's got 5 drawers in it. What I would do is I would start at the very top, and the location of that slide is whatever, 40 inches above the inside corner at the bottom of the cabinet. So I cut a piece of scrap that's the width of the slide, a piece of plywood. So I cut that piece of plywood to that length, and then I hold it on this side and I put in that slide, hold it on that side, put in that slide, and then I cut it down to the next size, do the next pair, next size, next pair, next size, next pair, working my way from the top down. And that works really well for me. If you built the cabinet square, which hopefully you did, or the dresser, then by resting on the bottom of the cabinet, you should be able to get your slide in square. So that's, it's a jig, I guess, because we're using a piece of wood to put the slides in, but it's not something I build. It's just something I do on demand as needed. I cut that piece of scrap in order to install slides. My iPad went to sleep. John asks, when using better hardwood for a project, how long ahead should we get the material? So a couple things, air dried versus kiln dried, that can affect it. I get all my stuff, I order all my stuff kiln dried. All the hardwood I bring in is kiln dried. And then in this part of the world, I'm in Wisconsin, my wood storage is actually in an unheated 2-car garage. So now in the wintertime, I'll bring that in at least 2 days before I'm going to use it. Longer is better. You want to give it the opportunity to acclimate to this environment before you start cutting wood. So I'm not worried about, on the ordering side, I've got some amount of wood stockpiled, and it might have been sitting out in that garage 6 months. I don't really know. When the pile gets low, then I order more. But the more important part of that is getting it from that non-heated or cooled in the summertime environment to this where it's temperature controlled, which simulates what it's like then in your house. So come February, when it's 20 below outside, literally air temperature of 20 below, I'm going to bring it in and give it way more time so it has more opportunity to acclimate. Like I said, on the time thing, more the acclimatization, acclimating, I don't know, whatever word I'm looking for, more is better. If there's no such thing as having it in here too long. Gabe asks, how long do you need to leave oak out to dry? It depends on thickness, and it's not just oak, it's any wood. A general rule of thumb to air dry wood, from if you cut it dripping wet green, is a year per inch of thickness. So a 1-inch piece is going to take about a year to fully dry, 2 inches, 2 years, linear relationship. It's not, you pay attention to, more specific attention to species when you kiln dry wood, but air drying, it's not as species specific. But get a moisture meter so you can keep track of it. Mike says, I read about Weekend with Wood event coming up and saw your name listed as one of the presenters. Looks a bit spendy, but could be fun and great learning. Tell us about this, what you'll be doing, and will it still be on with COVID-19 pandemic looming? So if you're not familiar with this Wood magazine in Des Moines, Iowa, for maybe 8 years now, has been doing an event called Weekend with Wood. I've been there every year since it started. There are, I don't know, 8 or 9 instructors, 9 or 10 instructors. And I don't, they have my topics. I don't remember what they are. I typically teach 5 or 6 different topics over the course of 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's scheduled for May, right around May 18th or so. I know regarding COVID, they're in a wait and see to see how things go. It was canceled in 2020 because of COVID. So going into 21, they're doing a wait and see with, is the vaccine going to bring everything around? Is it whatever, what's going on? That's not my call, that's their call. It's a great opportunity. There's a couple things going on. In attendees, it's a relatively small group. It's about 200 people. So there's a lot of interaction between all the woodworkers that come to this thing. And then it's access to people like myself who teach woodworking with a variety of topics, turning, CNC stuff, SketchUp classes. I don't know. The best thing to do is look at their website and see all the topics that are offered. So I want to say class sessions are like 50 minutes, unless a lot of what I do is double because it takes more time. So it's 2 sessions back to back, so 110 minutes. So the best thing is to look at the website and see what they're offering. And I think it's very cool. Fairly recently, they've added manufacturers coming to that. There's a little show area set up for that, and an opportunity to talk directly to people from Supermax Tools has been there. Iconic CNC has been there. Bessie Clamps, Type on Glue. So that's a neat opportunity too, to talk to the A-team from manufacturers. Robert says, getting ready to make a table with 4 11.5. Oh no, I got to read the numbers here. With 4 11 to 12.5 2-inch thick signboards, plain to clean them up. What's your suggestion for edge gluing fastening? Double biscuits? Dowels? You don't need to do any. You don't need to add anything to that glue up. If you do a good job on your joinery, the edge to edge joint with glue in it is plenty strong. The only reason I would add a biscuit or anything would be to assist with alignment when it all comes together, to hold the top surfaces flat. But the story I tell all the time is when I taught in Africa with Peace Corps, that was all hand tool work. And one of the projects the kids made was a stool. And so we would have to hand plane the edges and then glue up the seats of these stools. And so they do their hand planing, and then we didn't have clamps. So the way we would glue them is we'd put glue on that surface and do on one edge, and then do a rub joint, which is just what it sounds like. Rub those 2 surfaces together. That creates a little liquid vacuum with the glue, and then set that aside overnight. And the next day, that joint was absolutely robust and sound. And if you tried to break it, the wood alongside the joint is going to break. The joint is not. So you don't, on a standard edge-to-edge glue up, you don't need to add anything to that. Just the joint alone is fine. Jeremy asked, if wood glue is stronger than the wood itself, why are mechanical fasteners used and needed? Well, just because there's some applications where you screw parts together. But so I'm trying to think of one now. So a pocket hole joint would be a great example. You're putting screws in there because an end grain to long grain joint, even though that does get glued, we need the reinforcement of the screws. Where else do I do screws? In a lot of cases, do you call out brads? Mechanical fasteners like brads. The brad is only there because it's a little tiny clamp and it's holding the parts until the glue dries. So that could be something like a cleat that's going inside a cabinet. There's glue on the back of the cleat. And instead of trying to get a clamp on there to put it in place, I brad it or staple it. And that mechanical fastener is going to hold it until the glue dries. But if you wanted to, you could go back after the fact and take out the brad or the staple, and the glue would be fine. Roger says, I think it would come out better to use a scraper for the cutting board. You could. I'm okay with the scraper. I'm not great with the scraper. In my hands, it would be difficult for me to get that cutting board dead flat. So I would default to a power planer. But if you're good at using a hand plane or a scraper, that'd be a good way to go. I have a Ryobi plunge router. I purchased the Rockler Comic Sans lettering. I'm confused on to which collet I need to get. Would you know? So it's not the collet. I'm trying to think. Somewhere in this building, I've got the Rockler lettering set, but I don't know exactly where it is. But it's not. I don't think it's about the collet. It's about the guide bushing. So into your router, you end up putting a guide bushing, and the kit should tell you what size guide bushing you need, because this part, this shoulder, wow, it actually stayed in focus. That's cool. This shoulder has to fit into the template, and I can tell you this one would be too long because the templates are plastic, and this shoulder is higher, longer than the plastic is thick. So you need to know from Rockler or from the kit instructions what diameter, what length, guide bushing, and then what this does is that follows the pattern, that follows the letters, so that your router bit, when it's spinning, isn't going to dig into them. But yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know what size they call for there. David says, greetings from Mexico. Hola, David. Thanks for all the tricks and techniques, helping me with a lot of projects. That's cool. Thank you for that. Thanks for the nice words. I seem to go through pads on my random orbit sander frequently, like every 6 months. Is this normal, or am I doing something wrong? So this is an interesting thing, and there could probably be more information about this in the world. Let me think a second. Let's go sort of in this direction, because I've run into this. I try to do this without making you seasick. Or motion sick. And part of this can be paper choice. So with a mesh sandpaper, with a mesh paper like this, what I ended up, I just accidentally stumbled across this. I was going through, my Velcro wouldn't hold anymore. So what I found was that, especially with this kind of paper, you need to get a sacrificial disc. And let's see if my sander will, how far my sander will reach. I might have to bring the camera. Stop it. Thank you. Let me do this. This is kind of a circus here. Okay. So I keep touching the on switch, and it's connected to a vacuum. To extend the life of the pad, there's a sacrificial piece here. So this is the pad. That's like the base layer. This has got the loop of hook and loop on the back of it, and then the other Velcro component on the front. So once this is on here, it aligns with the dust collection holes, and it gets used just like a standard pad. But when sandpaper no longer sticks to this, I don't have to replace the whole pad. I just replace this. It's a disposable commodity. So that is what I would recommend. If that's what you're running into, which is that your Velcro gets to where it's not Velcroing anymore, your hook and loop isn't hooking, that's the reason why. So the next time you replace the pad, also get one of those sacrificial things for it, sacrificial pads. And I should have brought the iPad here, but I didn't think of that. Jim says, I have a piece of an old bowling alley I use as my primary bench. What type of finish or top coat would you recommend? I like oils for benches. So something like Watco Danish oil, Boyle linseed oil, tung oil, and that's what's on this. And the reason for that is it's real flexible. So when you're beating up on your bench, you don't have a hard, like glass-like finish on there that might craze or crack because you're on top of it all the time. The other thing with it is it's so easy to refresh. So like this bench is looking a little gross right now. So one of these days I'll spend some time with a random orbit sander and I'll clean it up, and then I can just refresh it with a new coat of oil. And that's very easy with the oils. And even if it doesn't look gross to the point where you need to sand it, you can just put more oil over the top. And it's one of the benefits to the oil finishes is that they're very easy to rejuvenate that way. So a couple reasons there why I'm a big fan of oils. Gabe says, the big tree slabs behind you when you're showing the sander are awesome. Yeah, I've got two amazing pieces of walnut in here, and they're actually sequence cut. So they're book matched, and some beautiful crotch in the end of them. I've got one of them leveled, the other one is not leveled, but they're going to end up glued edge to edge to make one big book match walnut table. It'll be like 30 by 72 when it's all done. They're absolutely beautiful, crazy cool. Michael says, do the mesh pads work better? They're expensive, but I think the dust collection is a little bit more effective on those than just having the distinct holes. And intuitively, it kind of makes sense because it's mesh. So we can draw air everywhere, not just through the holes. So I like that aspect of it. I think in the balance of probably in my pile over there, half my random orbit discs are mesh and the other half are not. I don't specifically make a point of getting the mesh ones. I just like, I'm not providing a great answer here. If that's what I happen to order, that's what I happen to order. I'm not going out of my way to get them, but I do think the dust collection on them is a little bit better. John says, in the list of top 5 must-have tools, does the router make the top 5? It makes my top 5 because I use it all the time. But it depends on what you're doing. So when we do these, it's a pretty common thing, like must-have tool lists are a pretty common thing. But outside of like a table saw, what mine is there, it's pretty hard to quantify that because like a bandsaw is real high on my list, but not everybody is comfortable with using a bandsaw. So I think a router is important because it's such a versatile tool. You can use it handheld, you can put it in a router table, you can do edge forming, you can do joinery. If you're going to own a dovetail jig, you're going to need a router. So yeah, I think it's a good one. Brian says, a good way to get into woodworking, not general construction, as a full profession. Well, my gig started part-time. I had a day job. And then I would do woodworking stuff on the side, nights and weekends, and then make an effort to sell that. I did a lot of shows. Word of mouth is huge. Put stuff in consignment stores. So that's a good way to go. Consignment stores take a big chunk. They take about 35% of the retail price. But the benefit to that is you don't have to take the credit card transaction. You don't have to sit in a retail store. So you can be doing what you do best, making woodworking stuff and letting them sell it. So consignment selling is a good way to go. And then, of course, have a business card, a name, a tag with everything that goes out of that place so that when people want to find you, they can. And then just hopefully, they tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends and it trickles and trickles and trickles from there. I would say most people I know were doing something else as I guess just in the world of being self-employed, most people I know were doing something else as probably a W-2 job as they built up their self-employment resume. And then eventually got comfortable to a point where, okay, I think I can take this leap and stick with just being self-employed. Have you ever used Osmo as a finish? Yeah, ironically, these are sitting here. These charcuterie boards, they've all got Osmo on them, which I think is the Osmo top oil. I like it. It takes a little getting used to. It takes very, very, very little of it to cover something, but it's got a nice sheen to it. I'm trying to look at the monitor and get it just the right way. It's got a little bit of a gloss to it. This is probably the third or fourth project I've put it on. Seems protective. So yeah, it's good. I'll show you, since I had that board in my hand, I'll show you the really cool one. This is, these are soft maple, and the quilting in this one is just absolutely amazing. And then live edge, of course, on that side. But that, boy, I'm really happy with that one. Let me, I'm going to say something I mentioned at the top. This time of year, you're maybe in your shop being Santa's workshop and making gifts. If you're looking for some ideas, if you go down below the chat roll on your screen, not on YouTube, but on WWGOA.com, when you're on that landing page, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a banner and it says 10 quick and easy woodworking gifts ideas. There's a free set of plans there. So if you click on the banner, you can get the plans and maybe infuse some new gift ideas into your woodworking if you're looking to do that. If it were me, I'd go ahead and grab the plans no matter what. So at some point when you're looking for a birthday gift or whatever it is you want to make, you can jump on that and make it and have it on hand already. What's the best way to strip or sand an acrylic sprayed finish off a marine table? I was to refinish it. Well, I don't know. Acrylic. I'm guessing you're going to have to sand it. I would, before I spent a lot of time doing that, I would find a manufacturer of that type of product and call them and ask them what, once it's cured out, how do you get it off? But my guess would be it's going to have to be a mechanical removal, not a chemical removal. What's one tool that has the biggest impact and use in your shop for the best value? Surface sander, drum sander. Did I say that fast enough? I started out a bunch of years ago with a 1632, a Performax 1632. At that time, Performax was like the sander company. Eventually, I switched to a Performax 2244, so 22-inch drum, but open-ended. So you could do 44-inch wide stuff. And then I upgraded again to a Supermax 25-inch. And that's an enclosed machine, not cantilevered. And the reason I say that, a lot of tools in here get used a lot. Table saw, joiner, planer, but every stick of wood I use goes through that sander. Maybe not every stick goes through the table saw and the joiner. And from a time-saving perspective, I commonly run 150 grit in there. So whatever grit I'm sanding on the drum sander is where I start finish sanding with a random orbit sander. So it saves me just so much time. The big name in that in industry is Time Saver, and it's such a great name for that machine because it's exactly what it is. So yeah, far and away that the Supermax drum sander, surface sander, is it's probably the machine that gets used the most in here of everything. It's got the most hours on it. Joshua asks, most recommended benchtop planer. DeWalt 7. Now, this is not tool test. This is idiosyncratic para me. DeWalt 735. I had one of those for a long time, just until I went to a bigger capacity. But variable speed, 3-knife cutter head, really good dust collection. anti-snipe mechanism built into it, so you don't have to throw a lock on it to get it to not snipe. So I had great luck with it. What size drill press recommend for a hobby woodworker? I had a benchtop drill press in here for the longest time, and it was fine. Like size, I think it might have been a 14-inch drill press. So when you talk about size on a drill press, that's the distance from the center of the chuck to the column, to the post. So in other words, it's I can get to the center of a 28-inch thing. No, is that right? Other way around. Other way around. It's the biggest thing I could do. That's what that capacity says. So that benchtop drill press served me fine for a long time, and that'd be a good way to go. You know, if there's an adapter available to allow Arbor Tech tools contour orbital sander with a 4-inch Makita disc grinder. Well, what it's the ID of the threaded hole in the orbital, right? And I've used mine on a DeWalt. I've got that sander, and I've used it on. So I don't know about an adapter, but I guess I would just double check and make sure that you don't sell. I mean, make sure that it doesn't already fit. You know what I mean? Like it threaded right onto my DeWalt, so I would just double check that. But outside of that, then I would contact Arbor Tech to see if there's something else that you need. Jim says, will the soft maple darken over time? I don't think so. I think with those charcuterie boards, we're looking at the final color right there. Brian follows up on his employment question. Thanks for the thorough answer. Do you need a business license to sell in consignment word of mouth? Well, business license. So at my old place, my shop was on a hobby farm, and I had to get, in order to run a business, it was zoned ag, but in order to, or no, zoned residential. In order to run a business on that property, I had to get what was called a special exception permit from the county. So I needed to do that just because I was insuring the building I was in and all of that kind of stuff. Business license, I would talk to an accountant, because as you start to generate revenue, you're going to need to claim that. And yeah, I would get an accountant. I mean, I have an FEIN, Federal Employment Identification Number, and it's going to be affected by, are you going to open this business as an S Corp? I own another business that's an LLC. So there's all sorts of stuff there that you should sort out with somebody who knows way more about it than I do. Matt says, in building a bookcase, are we close to a wall heater? What would you recommend for a finish that won't cause an issue? Well, don't get too close to the heater would be my first thing. And I think, it's probably a wash on general heat resistance, like, a little bit of radiant heat coming off of something, not a super hot coffee cup getting put on a table. I think the oils and polys and lacquer are all pretty similar. I guess what I would do to double check it is a couple things. Specialty stores like Sherwin-Williams or Hirschfield, specialty finishing stores, are a great resource. And go there and ask them this question. And then the other thing you could do is, if you have your eyeballs on a finish, if there's a particular polyurethane you're considering using, call that manufacturer and say to them, here's the scenario. I've checked, and this radiator is routinely, I don't know, what are they? 90 degrees all the time. And my bookcase is going to be 6 inches from that 90-degree surface. Is this finish going to be okay? And that's a better rifle shot of an answer than me spitballing it. Guy says, Merry Christmas, George. Thank you very much. When this pandemic is over, please do another Meet the Makers event. I attended the 2019 event, enjoyed it a lot. Enjoyed seeing how you set up shop and a few ideas for your own shop. It was, yeah, so we previously did in summer of 2019, Meet the Makers here. So a bunch of local makers, Matt Cremona, Chris Lyons, Paul Mayer, I'm going to forget a bunch of people, were here. Some of those people were running demonstrations. I ran my sawmill. The whole thing was like 5 hours long. We had drawings, free event. So it was cool. It was a neat way. It was a way for, it was a way for people to meet makers, a bunch of makers from the Twin Cities area, all under one roof. Plus we had these free demos and stuff going on. So I was going to do it again this year, but then of course with everything going on, no could do. So I'm watching, hopefully June of 2021, we'll be able to do it again. Jim says you get a lot of sanding marks from your drum sander. Nope. It's with 150 grit, it's streak free. Bill says, I have the 2244, but can never get the drum belt or the drive belt to track correctly. Is there a secret? It takes very small adjustments and initially like a lot of attention. So I remember when I first got mine, I think I was overcompensating all the time. So it's kind of like a belt sander. If the drive belt is tracking to the right, you tighten it on the right so that you can push it back to the left or loosen it on the left. But it takes really small changes to make that happen. And because it moves so slowly, it takes forever to track back. So make a small change, run it a long time and see what the effect of that change is. Bob asked, do you keep the infeed and outfeed tables flat or slightly raised on the planer? Dead flat. Mike says, on the 3-knife DeWalt, did you ever change from straight to helical? Nope. They're cool. I've got helical cutter head on my new planer, on my Woodmaster, and I absolutely love it. The surface finish off of that is absolutely incredible. That being said, the surface finish off of that DeWalt wasn't bad, so I never swapped. Going to have any CNC classes soon, specifically V-carve? Yeah, I'm getting a lot of inquiries about classes here, and I'm, like Weekend with Wood, like the open house, I'm just in a wait and see thing. This is a very intimate environment when we have a class, and to make it cost effective for me, I really need to have 8 or 10 people in here at a time. So, excuse me. So I have to be really cognizant of protecting myself, protecting the space, protecting everybody who's coming. My middle kid is immune compromised. So if I want to be able to see her, I have to be careful about what I'm exposed to. So it's, yes, classes are going to happen again, but I don't know. I don't know when. Robbie says, I have a 6-inch Powermatic joiner, want to change to helical. What is a good one and is it hard to change? I don't know and don't know because I haven't done it. What do you do for keeping tops clean and smooth on your table saw and planer? Bostik Glide Coat. So clean is just a housekeeping thing, but then I spray them. I'm coming back. Where are we? Bostik Glide Coat. So it's aerosol and a tool-specific lubricant. It'll seal them up. So like in the summertime when ambient humidity is high, it'll protect the cast iron surfaces from that humidity. And also it just keeps things moving. So it's not just the cast iron, like on the rip fence where there are components on the rip fence where they glide against the rail and they glide across the top of the saw. I spray those. The miter gauge bar, the bottom of the miter gauge where it drags on the tabletop, base of my router, surface of my dovetail jig, any place where there's contact to contact, surface to surface, that gets sprayed with the glide coat. Bob says, having trouble with snipe when using a planer, ideas on how to minimize. Well, benchtop or stationary. On stationary planers, generally snipe is adjusted out by controlling the down pressure on the infeed and outfeed rollers. On a benchtop planer, they don't have those adjustments. So if it's got a lock, a headlock, use the headlock. And if you're still getting snipe or it doesn't have a headlock, then the only thing you can really do is cut your stock extra long and unfortunately plan on cutting the snipe off each end, or feed a piece of scrap, precede your target material with a piece of scrap and then chase it with a piece of scrap, and that you'll get snipe in the scrap, not in your good piece. On a 10-inch disc sander, what grit sandpaper is best overall? On mine, I have 80 on there pretty much all the time. I consider that, I don't know, a roughing tool, not a finishing tool. So 80 works well for me. Looking at upgrading from a tabletop jointer to a full size, is parallelogram versus dovetail ways worth the extra dough? So on a parallelogram jointer, which I've got one here, we could look at one of the aspects of it. Let me move a little bit of stuff. And we're going to want to see there. So this is a parallelogram, and let me unplugify. So part of what comes out of that is that when I adjust the bed up or down, so again, we're unplugged, it maintains a more uniform distance here. So on a dovetail bed planer, when I decrease depth of cut or increase depth of cut, it's sliding down dovetail ways. And that opens up a gap here. I would say that's part of it. A bigger thing with a parallelogram bed is this. With a parallelogram bed, if it turns out that these two beds are not coplanar, I can use these jack screws in order to bring everything back so they are coplanar. That can be done on a dovetailed planer or joiner, but it's very difficult. You're shimming between the casting and the between the castings in order to make that adjustment. Now, that being said, this is the first parallelogram bed I've had. I opened my first shop in 1998. I put this in here in 2015. So I don't want to make it sound like dovetail way jointers are inherently bad, because I use the heck out of them for a bunch of years. So it can work. It's just, given the opportunity to go parallelogram, it's a good way to go. Jeremy says, is that a Delta Cruzer miter saw? Yes, right? There. 10-inch. Hi, George. Happy holidays. I have a 2-car detached garage shop. Oops, it jumped here. What are your thoughts on heating the shop with ventless propane heat? I don't have natural gas, but I have 240 volts AC. Well, ventless, so when you heat with propane, it tends to give off a lot of moisture. So I would say that is not going to be a great idea. I'm not an HVAC guy, so it's very possible that I'm missing aspects of propane ventless heaters. But I know I camp a lot, I hunt a lot, And if I sit with like a Mr. Buddy heater, which is a propane tank with a heater on top of it, it's kicking off heat, but it's also kicking off a lot of moisture. And that's, I think you would get your shop more humid than you want it to be. But I would check with somebody that knows way more about HVAC than I. Frank asks, how do I avoid brush marks for a shellac 2-pound cut? I do not know because I spray shellac. So I'm a heavy shellac user. I use it as a base coat on everything I put finish on, but I never brush it. So unfortunately, I am the wrong guy to ask. I have cabinet doors. I'm making the rail. I have cabinet doors. I'm making the rail install groove for glass inserts as 1/4 inch. The glass is 1/8 inch. How do I make up the difference? Well, I don't know. You could. So it sounds like, so let's talk about a couple things. It sounds like you're making a grooved frame. With glass doors, your best bet is a rabbeted frame, not a grooved frame. And that allows a couple things. One, you can put the whole door together without the glass in it, do all your finishing, then install the glass, and you put molding or something on the back of it, trim, to hold the glass in place. The other thing is, if the glass is trapped inside a door frame and it ever breaks, you have to destroy the door frame to replace the glass. So when it's rabbeted in, then the glass obviously can come and go independent of the door frame. In your case, I don't know, you'd have to find, if this is the route you're going to go, you need to find an 1/8 inch of something to stuff behind it, I guess, to push it forward. You could look at Rockler. A lot of companies sell a product called space balls, just what it sounds like. They're little foam balls that are used to take up expansion and contraction on solid wood door panels. They're about 1/4 inch in diameter, but they might compress enough to push behind the glass. You'd have to try it. I'm not sure, but that's I guess what you're looking for, is some little foam thingy that you can tuck in behind the glass to make up the difference. Building 3/4 plywood carcass for a floating TV console. Do I need to edge band it if I'm just going to paint the carcass white anyway? I probably would. The reason being, well, here's what I would do. I would experiment with this. Take a piece of the same plywood, same material, sand the edge to like 220, and then hit it first with Zinsser primer. I know there's some in my finishing cabinet. Let me run quick and see if I can locate it fast. I don't want to burn up a bunch of time here. There it is. All right. So the problem with going with paint directly on the plywood edge is it's going to soak in differently to that raw edge than it will the surface. So I've had really good luck on MDF projects that are paint grade projects where sand the edge of the MDF, and it's the same issue. The face of MDF is very densely packed. The edges are really porous. So you spray them first with this primer, and this has got a lot of body to it, a lot of solids in it. And you spray it with that, then you sand that, then do your top coat. So do that as an experiment first. And if you like the resulting look, then you're golden. If you don't, then go with the edge banding. Have you etched glass with your CNC? Have you used any bits other than the widget works? ShopRoute promotes them, but I haven't used them personally. So no, I've got, yes, I've etched a lot of glass. I did this one not too long ago. So the sign I have above the door, I too shall something make and glory in the making. Where am I? So this was done on the CNC with the diamond etcher. And that's the only one I've ever used, and it's worked great for me. And I've done miles and miles of granite and glass with it. All right, about 4 minutes to go. I'm making tapered legs 3x3 for a big maple table. I used a taper jig, but as soon as I did one side, the other would not be straight. How do I do an even taper on all four sides? Look on GOA.com. This is there. I know I've done this as a video. Yeah, it'd be way easier to just watch the video than for me to try to verbally explain it, but it's on there. I have an HVLP sprayer with a variety of tips. Is shellac safe to spray with a regular fan that is not explosion proof? Yeah, it can ignite. So if you have, I mean, it's denatured alcohol as a solvent for shellac. If you have a mist of shellac and it got in front of a spark or a flame, it could possibly ignite. So I wouldn't take the chance. What is the mayhem? I don't know. A guest wrote that one. I don't know what mayhem is, so I don't know. Christian says, you have a good beginner project idea if I have a circ saw and basic tools. So with starter projects, my advice is always don't make what I want you to make what you want to make, because then you're going to be invested in it and you're going to want to grow your skills and you'll be excited about it. And so poke around on Etsy and Pinterest and look for stuff that interests you, and then look at, it shouldn't be a Chippendale highboy because that would be too complex, but look for simple looking projects that interest you, and then start looking around on the web for maybe there's a dresser top valet or something that you're interested in. So then start looking around. Are there videos on that? Are there plans out there? And use those as a starting point to start doing that work in your own shop. So it's a lot of people I know who do what I do, content creation, provide the same advice. It needs to be important to you so that you want to grow and move forward with it. What's the major difference between kiln dried and air dried? Won't they take on moisture equally? Isn't lumber quality based more on storage than drying? Nope. So kiln drying will bring it down to typically 6 to 8%. Air drying brings it down to 12 to 14%. The lower that initial moisture content is, the less reactive the material will be over the long haul. The less prone it'll be to doing wonky things as it just lives in an environment someplace. So the lower moisture content we get from kiln dried wood does provide a more stable material. That being said, 150 years ago, they didn't have kiln dried wood and they built absolutely beautiful pieces. So I don't want to make it sound like one can't or shouldn't work with air dried stuff. You just have to treat it a little bit differently because it reacts, it expands and contracts seasonally quite a bit differently. All right, that got us to 5 o'clock. So this is our last Thursday gig before Santa comes. So hopefully everybody, I want to show you just one thing. Because the detail on this thing is incredible. I still have to sand it, but my kid's name is also George. Got to get in the right light here. So I'm making him, hopefully he's not watching, I doubt he is. I'm making him the St. George for Christmas, CNC cut. And I did this the other day, long machine time, about 4 hours machine time. And I still got to get in here with a sander and finish it. But I just can't get over the detail in it. I am just crazy impressed with how this thing cut. And cut that out of hard maple. The maple's got just a little figure to it. It's going to be neat when it gets finished on it. Anyway, that reminded me, because we were talking about Santa coming. So have a great Christmas and a happy New Year and a wonderful holiday, however you celebrate your holiday this time of year. Remember that right below the chat roll on WWGOA.com, there's a link that you can click for 10 gift projects that you can get for free. So check that out. Totally unrelated. December 21st, but I'm kind of a sky guy. December 21st, Saturn and Jupiter, right, are going to be really, really close together. They're going to look like one big bright star in the sky. So take a second and stop being busy. And the sky has been absolutely beautiful this month. You can see Mars every day at night at sunset, and you can see Venus very distinctly in the morning. And Jupiter and Saturn are coming. So lots of stuff, lots of cool stuff going on in the sky. That's it. I'm going to check out. Have a great holiday, and I will see you after the new year. Take us away, Katie.